Today I'm at the Lower Otay Reservoir east of San Diego. Behind me is the Savage Dam. The Savage Dam is actually the second dam to have been here, the first being the Lower Otay Dam, which burst in 1916, supposedly because of the actions of one man, Charlie Hatfield. Though he was born in Kansas, Charlie's family moved to San Diego around the time he was 9, and he grew up in this area, eventually becoming a sewing machine salesman. But in his free time, he studied pluviculture, which is the study of rainmaking, or producing rain, by artificial means. Charlie considered himself a moisture accelerator, which I'm sure many men would claim to be. By 1902, Charlie had created a 23-ingredient concoction, a Dr. Pepper of rainmaking, that he used by evaporating in galvanized steel tanks on top of 25-foot towers that he built. And supposedly, these would seed the atmosphere or clouds and produce rain. By 1904, he hired a promoter and eventually ran ads in the local newspapers, and some ranchers in the Los Angeles area hired him to produce rain for their crops. And supposedly he was successful, making hundreds of dollars off those ranchers outside of Los Angeles. Charlie took his secret formula on the road and traveled all over the western United States and up into Canada, taking on contracts to produce rain for ranchers and miners and anyone else who happened to need water at the time or was facing drought. One notable failure was he went up to the Yukon Territory of Canada and failed to produce rain for a gold mining operation that was going on up there, though he did get paid his expenses, but left quietly, having not fulfilled his contract. In 1915, though, San Diego was facing a drought, and the city council reached out to Charlie to try and form some sort of contract to see if he could produce rain for the area. He agreed and said that he would produce rain up to several inches for free, and then $1,000 per inch after that, up to 50 inches, after which it'd be free again. The San Diego City Council bargained him down to $10,000 flat rate just to fill the Morena Reservoir, which is several miles to the east of here. And the Morena Reservoir, at the time, held 15 billion gallons and was down to about 5 billion gallons, which meant that Charlie was responsible for filling it with 10 billion gallons of rainwater, which he agreed to do. Now, no written contract was formed up, but a verbal agreement was decided, and Charlie took that and pressed on with his work, setting up his towers a little after the new year, the first week of January in 1916. Now, setting up shop on the edge of Morena Reservoir, he built 25-foot towers, several of them, and then poured his concoction that was set to evaporate up into the atmosphere. And around January 5th, it started to rain, and it continued to rain. And it rained heavily on the 14th and 15th. And it rained so much that the reservoirs in the area, including the Lower Otay Dam and the Sweetwater Dam, were starting to overflow. Bridges and railroads were being affected, sometimes getting destroyed. Power lines were getting knocked down. But by the 19th, the rain had subsided a little bit. But Charlie had a contract to keep with, and that was to fill the Morena Reservoir, which at the time was not full despite all the rain. He continued on with his work, and it started to rain again. And on the 26th, it poured. It rained a little over 2 inches in San Diego, but in the area around San Diego, specifically the 101 square mile catchment for this particular reservoir, it was raining up to and over 20 inches at a time. On the 27th, the Lower Otay Dam burst, and a 20-foot wall of water smashed its way all the way to San Diego Bay, killing around 20 people. Now, Charlie, having been successful at fulfilling the Morena Reservoir, drove into the city and was met with an angry mob who threatened him, saying that he was responsible for all of the damage that had been caused. And the San Diego City Council refused to pay him his $10,000 contract, equal to over $200,000 today. Attempting to make the most of it, he requested at least $4,000 for having fulfilled what he was asked to do. And newspapers at the time interviewing Charlie said that he claimed no responsibility and that the city should have been ready for the amount of water that he was requested to produce. Eventually, San Diego City Council outright refused to pay him at all. And for over 20 years, Charlie fought the city trying to get paid his $10,000. And eventually, 2 separate trials found him not at fault for having produced the rain, saying that it was an act of God, which relieved him of the liability of the $3.5 million in damages that the San Diego City Council said he was responsible for, but at the same time meant that he wasn't going to get paid his $10,000 contract. Eventually, as time wore on, the Great Depression came through. Charlie found less and less work, despite the notoriety for what he had done in the San Diego area. And eventually, the Depression overcame his business, and he went back to selling sewing machines. Rainmaking and cloud seeding isn't impossible. It's actually used by governments and scientists in certain aspects. And at one point, the US government was using it almost as an act of war, attempting to seed clouds over Vietnam in order to keep the monsoon season going so that it would wash out trails and truck routes used by the Viet Cong and the North Vietnamese Army. Now, supporters of Charlie will say that he was a legitimate rainmaker, that he had a 23-ingredient formula that he could produce rain with, whereas critics will say that he was more of a con man and that he really was just a keen student of meteorological timing, choosing when he knew that there was a possibility that rain or thunderstorms were on the way, and then going to an area and soliciting a contract. And if the rain came, he got paid, and if it didn't, he just quietly left the area and went on searching for another contract. Whether Charlie was legitimate or not, we'll never know. He took his recipe to the grave in 1958, and with it, all of his secrets. If you enjoy the content in the video, please subscribe, and as always, until next time, get lost.